The satellite uplink crackled with static as Petty Officer First Class Maya Chen pressed her fingers against the encrypted headset, her dark eyes reflecting the ghostly green glow of multiple monitor screens in the cramped communications bunker. 300 miles away, somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, SEAL Team 7 had gone silent 47 minutes ago. The last transmission had been Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison's voice, tight with controlled urgency. Phoenix Base. We have eyes on the target compound. Moving to Phase 2. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Now there was nothing but the endless hiss of dead air and the rapid beeping of her heart monitor, which she'd forgotten to remove from her morning PT session. Maya's fingers danced across the keyboard, her electronic warfare training kicking into overdrive as she cycled through communication frequencies, searching for any trace of the team's encrypted signals. The bunker smelled of stale coffee and ozone from overworked electronics, but she barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to the data streams flowing across her screens, each line of code a potential lifeline to 8 men who might already be dead. "Chun, talk to me." Colonel Sarah Martinez's voice cut through the electronic hum as she entered the communication center, her desert combat boots clicking against the concrete floor. Martinez had commanded forward operating bases for 15 years, and Maya had never seen worry lines this deep around her commander's steel gray eyes. "Still." "Nothing, ma'am," Maya replied, not looking away from her screens. Her voice carried the controlled calm of someone trained to function under pressure, but her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the satellite dish orientation for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Last telemetry showed them approaching grid. Reference 41 RQQ1 234567890, approximately 2 clicks from the target. All biometric readings were normal until she paused, pulling up a cascade of data on her secondary monitor. Until they weren't. The biometric data told a story that made Maya's stomach clench with dread. Heart rates had spiked simultaneously across all 8 team members at 0347 hours, then dropped to near baseline levels that suggested either unconsciousness or worse. The GPS beacons had continued moving for another 12 minutes before going completely dark, their last known position inside what intelligence had designated as a Taliban communications hub. Martinez leaned over Maya's shoulder, her weathered hands gripping the back of the operator's chair. "What about their backup comms?" "Dead. Primary radio, satellite uplink, emergency beacon. Everything's been systematically shut down." Maya's fingers continued their urgent dance across multiple keyboards, switching between frequency analyzers, signal processors, and the classified electronic warfare suite that few people on the base even knew existed. "But here's what's interesting, Colonel. They weren't just jamming our signals. Someone was actively mimicking our encryption protocols." The weight of that revelation settled between them like a physical presence. Electronic warfare at this level required sophisticated equipment and extensive knowledge of U.S. military communication systems. This wasn't some cave-dwelling insurgent with a radio jammer. This was someone who understood their technology intimately. Maya pulled up a 3-dimensional map of the target area, overlaying it with electronic signature data she'd been collecting. For the past 3 weeks, red dots marked known communication nodes, while blue lines showed the team's planned infiltration route. But now, scattered across the map like digital breadcrumbs, were yellow markers indicating the electronic signatures she'd detected in the minutes before the team went silent. "Ma'am, I think I know why they were compromised," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a terrible realization. "Look at this." She highlighted a series of electronic intercepts her systems had recorded over the past 72 hours. Hidden within what appeared to be routine cellular traffic were burst transmissions using military-grade encryption protocols. Someone had been monitoring SEAL Team 7's preparations, possibly for days. Jesus Christ, Martinez breathed. How did our security protocols miss this? Maya's jaw tightened as she cross-referenced the intercepted signals with known terrorist communication patterns. Because whoever's doing this isn't just using our encryption, they're using our exact protocols, our frequency-hopping sequences, even our authentication codes. Colonel, they have someone on the inside. The command bunker fell silent, except for the steady hum of electronics and the distant sound of helicopters returning from patrol. Maya continued working, her training overriding the fear that threatened to paralyze her. She joined the Navy 6 years ago as a wide-eyed electronics technician from San Francisco, drawn by the promise of cutting-edge technology and the chance to serve her country. 3 deployments and countless hours of specialized training had transformed her into one of the military's most skilled electronic warfare specialists, capable of threading digital needles that others couldn't even see. But none of that training had prepared her for this moment, the crushing weight of knowing that 8 good men might be dead because someone they trusted had betrayed them. Her secondary monitor chimed with an incoming priority message. Maya's heart lurched as she recognized the encryption signature. It was from SEAL Team 7's communication system, the very system that had been dark for nearly an hour. With shaking hands, she opened the message. Phoenix Base, this is Mongoose 6. Team 7 has been captured. Repeat, Team 7 has been captured. Electronic surveillance suggests inside compromise of operational security. Do not send extraction until... The message cut off abruptly, but Maya had seen enough. Morrison was alive, and he'd managed to get word out despite their captivity. More importantly, he'd confirmed her worst suspicions about the security breach. Martinez was already reaching for the secure phone to contact higher command when Maya grabbed her arm. Colonel, wait. If there's a mole in our communications chain, calling this in might make things worse. Chun, I can't just sit on intelligence that one of our teams has been captured. I'm not asking you to sit on it, ma'am. I'm asking you to let me find them first. Maya turned back to her screens, her fingers already flying across the keyboard as she began initializing programs most people didn't know existed. Give me 6 hours. If I can't locate them and figure out who's feeding intelligence to the enemy, then we'll have no choice but to go through normal channels and hope for the best. Martinez studied Maya's face, seeing something there that reminded her of her own younger self, the desperate determination of someone who refused to accept failure when lives were on the line. What exactly are you proposing? Maya's screens were already filling with cascading data streams as her electronic warfare suite came online. I'm going to do what I do best, Colonel. I'm going to make their own technology work against them. The next few hours would determine whether SEAL Team 7 lived or died, and whether Maya Chen could live up to the trust that 8 good men had placed in her skills and judgment. Maya opened a secure partition on her workstation and began loading software that officially didn't exist. The Counter-Electronic Warfare Analysis Protocol, known to its handful of users as CEWAP, had been developed by a joint Navy and a task force specifically for situations like this. It could analyze electronic signatures, trace communication pathways, and even inject false data into enemy networks, all while remaining virtually undetectable. As the program initialized, Maya's mind raced through the tactical situation. SEAL Team 7 had been inserted via helicopter at 0200 hours, with a mission timeline that should have seen them clear of the target area by dawn. The compound they were hitting was believed to house a high-value Taliban communications hub, complete with sophisticated equipment that had been intercepting and analyzing American military communications for months. What intelligence hadn't known? What Maya was beginning to suspect was that the communications hub wasn't just intercepting their signals. It was actively participating in their networks, masquerading as a legitimate node in the military's communication system. The implications were staggering. "Chun, I'm giving you 4 hours, not 6, Martinez said, settling into a chair beside Maya's workstation. "After that, I have to report the situation up the chain, mole or no mole." Maya nodded, not taking her eyes off the screens. "Understood, ma'am. I'll take whatever time I can get." The CEWAP system came online with a soft chime, its interface displaying a real-time map of all electronic communications within a 50-mile radius of the target area. Maya began the delicate process of identifying and isolating the enemy's communication nodes, looking for the digital fingerprints that would lead her to SEAL Team 7. What she found made her blood run cold. The enemy wasn't just using American encryption protocols. They were using them so effectively that their communications were being automatically routed through U.S. military satellite networks. Someone had given them not just the codes, but the entire network architecture. Maya Chen had always been different from the other kids in her neighborhood. While her friends in San Francisco's Richmond district were content with video games and social media, she was in her father's electronics repair shop, learning to coax life from broken circuit boards and failed hard drives. Her parents, both immigrants from Taiwan, who had built a modest but successful business fixing everything from smartphones to industrial equipment, had recognized their daughter's gift early. "Electronics are like people, Mei-Lin," her father, David, had told her during one of their late-night repair sessions when she was 14. He was the only one who still called her by her Chinese name, a connection to heritage that felt both comforting and constraining. "They have their own language, their own ways of telling you what's wrong. You just have to learn to listen." Maya had listened and learned, and discovered that she had an almost supernatural ability to understand the digital world. By 16, she was supplementing the family income by providing off-the-books IT support to local businesses. By 18, she was turning down full scholarships to MIT and Stanford because something deep inside her needed to serve something larger than herself. Now 6 years and 3 deployments later, sitting in a communications bunker halfway around the world from that Richmond district repair shop, Maya wondered if her father would recognize the person she'd become. The girl who used to fix neighborhood kids' gaming consoles was now manipulating satellite networks and hunting digital ghosts across enemy communication systems. The CEWAP interface showed her a complex web of interconnected signals, but finding the specific thread that would lead to SEAL Team 7 required a level of intuitive pattern recognition that couldn't be taught in any military school. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, letting her father's voice echo in her memory. "Listen to what the electronics are trying to tell you." She opened her eyes and began to listen. The enemy's communication pattern had subtle rhythms, tiny variations in transmission timing that most analysts would dismiss as network lag or equipment inconsistencies. But Maya had learned to hear the human elements hidden in digital noise. Someone on the enemy side was nervous, making small mistakes in transmission protocols that created barely detectable anomalies in the signal structure. "There," she whispered, highlighting a series of communications that showed microsecond timing variations. "You're trying too hard to be perfect." Maya began tracing the imperfect signals back to their source, following a digital trail that led through cell towers, satellite relays, and hardwired communication nodes. The path was deliberately complex, designed to confuse and discourage pursuit, but every system left traces if you knew how to look for them. Colonel Martinez had remained silent for the past hour, watching Maya work with the intensity of a surgeon performing life-saving surgery. The base around them continued its normal rhythm shift changes, equipment maintenance, the eternal cycle of military routine, but their small corner of the world had narrowed to the urgent glow of computer screens and the soft clicking of Maya's keyboards. "Chun, tell me something good," Martinez said finally, her voice tight with controlled tension. "I'm getting closer, ma'am." Maya pulled up a topographical map overlaid with communication node locations. The enemy's primary transmission site is definitely in grid reference 41RQQ, about 3 kilometers northeast of the original target compound. But there's something else: secondary sites here, and here. She marked 3 additional locations on the map. This isn't just a communications hub, Colonel. It's a full electronic warfare installation. The implications hit both women simultaneously. If the enemy had established a sophisticated electronic warfare capability in the region, it meant they had resources, expertise, and intelligence support far beyond what anyone had suspected. It also meant that SEAL Team 7 had walked into a trap that was months or even years in the making. Maya's personal communication device buzzed with an encrypted message from her younger brother Kevin, a junior at UC Berkeley studying computer science. Even across the vast distance and time difference, he maintained their weekly check-ins with the determination of someone who worried about his older sister's safety but would never admit it directly. Working on anything cool? His message read, accompanied by a photo of his latest programming project, a machine learning algorithm designed to predict traffic patterns in San Francisco. Maya stared at the message for a long moment, thinking about the different worlds they inhabited. Kevin's biggest worry was whether his code would compile correctly, while she was racing against time to prevent 8 men from dying in a hostile country thousands of miles from home. The contrast felt surreal, like trying to bridge 2 completely different universes. She typed back a brief reply. Always. Stay safe, little brother. Love you. The moment of connection to her other life, her civilian life, helped center Maya's thoughts. This wasn't just about military objectives or electronic warfare protocols. This was about people, the team members, who were counting on her, the families back home who would be devastated if their loved ones didn't return, and the broader community of trust that held military units together in the face of impossible circumstances. Maya returned to her screens with renewed focus. The CEWAP system had finished its deep analysis of the enemy's communication patterns, revealing a network architecture that was both impressive and deeply troubling. The enemy had essentially created a mirror image of American military communications, complete with redundant pathways, encrypted relay stations, and even false authentication protocols designed to confuse automated security systems. Colonel, I need to show you something, Maya said, her voice carrying a new note of urgency. Look at this network topology. Martinez leaned in as Maya displayed a 3-dimensional representation of the enemy's electronic infrastructure. It was sophisticated beyond anything they'd encountered before, too sophisticated to have been built without extensive knowledge of American systems and significant external support. This level of integration suggests they've been planning this for a very long time, Maya continued. And Colonel, look at these authentication protocols. They're not just similar to ours, they're identical. Someone gave them our exact specifications. The weight of betrayal hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Somewhere in the American military or intelligence structure, someone was actively working to undermine operations and get people killed. The thought made Maya sick, but it also crystallized her determination to find and stop the traitor. Her workstation chimed with an alert from the automated monitoring system. She'd set up to watch for any new communications from the target area. Maya's heart raced as she opened the intercept dot. It was another message fragment, this one even shorter than Morrison's earlier transmission. Phoenix Base, time running out. Interrogation beginning. Electronic countermeasures compromised. Need immediate. The message cut off again. But Maya had extracted enough metadata to triangulate the transmission source with much greater precision. The GPS coordinates placed SEAL Team 7 in a compound approximately 4 kilometers from their original target, in an area that intelligence maps showed as uninhabited mountain terrain. They're alive, Maya said, her voice tight with emotion. and they're trying to help us find them. Martinez checked her watch. 2 hours left, Chen. What's your next move? Maya's fingers were already flying across the keyboard, initiating a program sequence that would have been considered science fiction just a few years earlier. I'm going to turn their own electronic warfare system against them, Mom. If they want to play in our digital sandbox, they're going to have to play by my rules. The first indication that Maya's digital assault was working came 37 minutes later, when enemy communications in the target area began showing signs of systematic degradation. Error rates in their encrypted transmissions increased dramatically. Routing protocols started failing at random intervals, and their sophisticated signal mimicking capabilities began producing increasingly obvious mistakes. Maya had spent the past hour implementing what she privately called digital poison, carefully crafted data packets that appeared to be routine network maintenance commands, but actually introduced cascading failures into the enemy's communication infrastructure. It was delicate work that required her to balance aggression with subtlety. Too heavy-handed, and the enemy would simply shut down their systems and disappear. Too gentle, and SEAL Team 7 would be executed before she could locate them. Chen. I'm seeing unusual activity on multiple enemy channels, reported Specialist Torres from the Signals Intelligence Station across the bunker. Torres was a talented young analyst, but he lacked Maya's specialized training in electronic warfare. Looks like they're having some kind of system malfunction. Maya allowed herself a small smile. Not a malfunction, Torres. More like digital food poisoning. Her primary screen showed the real-time status of the enemy's communication network, with dozens of nodes blinking between green and red as her software systematically disrupted their operations. But buried in the chaos, she was beginning to see patterns that told her much more than just network topology. The enemy's response to her attacks revealed organizational structure, command hierarchies, and operational priorities. Most importantly, it showed her which communication nodes were most critical to their operations, and by extension, which locations were most likely to house high-value prisoners. Colonel, Maya called out, her voice carrying new confidence. I think I know where. They're holding the team. Martinez appeared at her workstation within seconds. Show me. Maya highlighted a cluster of communication nodes in the mountainous terrain northeast of the original target. These 3 locations showed the most sophisticated countermeasures when I started my attack. They're also the only ones that maintained full encryption protocols, even after I disrupted their primary systems. That level of operational security suggests they have something important to protect. Or someone, Martinez added grimly. Exactly. But here's what's interesting. Look at the communication traffic between these nodes. Maya displayed a flowchart showing message patterns between the 3 locations. They're not just coordinating security. They're actively discussing prisoner handling procedures, interrogation schedules, and extraction timelines. Maya had been running linguistic analysis software on the intercepted communications, looking for keywords and phrases that might indicate the presence of American prisoners. The enemy was using voice-over IP protocols that could be decrypted with sufficient processing power and the right algorithms. What she'd found made her stomach clench with anger and determination. The intercepted communications revealed that SEAL Team 7 was indeed being held prisoner, split between 2 of the 3 locations she'd identified. 4 team members, including Lieutenant Commander Morrison, were being held at the primary site, while the other 4 were at a secondary location approximately 2 kilometers away. The separation was a standard counter-rescue tactic designed to complicate any potential extraction operation, but the intercepts also revealed something more disturbing. The prisoners were scheduled for final interrogation beginning at sunset, followed by disposal of assets that were no longer useful. Maya glanced at the digital clock on her workstation. Sunset was in less than 3 hours. Colonel, we're out of time for conventional extraction, Maya said, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "But I think I can do something about that." Martinez studied Maya's determined expression. "What are you thinking?" "The enemy's electronic warfare capabilities depend on coordination between their different sites. They need constant communication to maintain their operational security and respond to threats." Maya's fingers danced across her keyboard, pulling up network diagrams and tactical analysis. "But their biggest strength is also their biggest vulnerability. If I can completely disrupt their communication network at exactly the right moment, it'll create a window of opportunity for the team to escape." "Chun, that assumes the team is still capable of mounting an escape attempt." Maya pulled up the biometric data she'd been monitoring from the team's emergency medical transmitters. The devices were designed to be nearly undetectable and extremely difficult to remove, broadcasting vital signs and basic physiological information on ultra-low frequency channels that most enemies didn't even know existed. "Look at this," she said, highlighting the readouts. "All 8 team members are showing elevated but stable vital signs consistent with stress and mild dehydration, but no indications of serious injury. Heart rate variability suggests they're conscious and alert. Colonel, they're waiting for an opportunity." Martinez studied the data, her expression shifting from concern to cautious optimism. "What kind of opportunity are we talking about?" Maya opened a new program on her workstation, one that she'd never used in actual combat, but had trained with extensively during advanced electronic warfare courses. The Coordinated Electronic Attack Protocol, or CEAP, was designed to simultaneously target multiple enemy communication and control systems, creating synchronized failures that would temporarily blind and deafen an enemy force. "I can give them 15 minutes, maybe 20 if I'm lucky," Maya said. "Complete communications blackout, GPS jamming that'll confuse their rapid response teams, and synchronized failures in their electronic security systems. But it's a one-shot deal. Once I trigger it, they'll know exactly what's happening, and they'll adapt their systems to prevent it from working again. What do you need from me?" "Permission to implement SEEP and a direct line to whoever's running close air support in the region. If this works, the team is going to need immediate extraction, and they won't have communications to coordinate it." Martinez was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks. CEAP was classified at levels that required authorization from senior commanders, and implementing it without proper clearance could end Maya's career, even if it worked perfectly. "But 8 good men would die if they did nothing." "Do it," Martinez said finally. "I'll take responsibility for the authorization." Maya nodded and began the complex process of configuring CEAP for the specific characteristics of the enemy's network. The software required detailed knowledge of target systems, precise timing coordinates, and careful calibration to ensure maximum disruption without causing permanent damage that might escalate the situation beyond control as she worked. Maya's mind kept returning to her father's advice about listening to what electronics were trying to tell her. The enemy's communication system was sophisticated and well defended, but it had been built by humans, and humans always made mistakes. She just had to find the right mistakes to exploit. The first vulnerability she identified was in their encryption. Key rotation protocols. The enemy was using American-style security procedures, but they were implementing them slightly imperfectly, creating tiny windows of opportunity where communications could be intercepted and even modified. Maya began crafting exploit packages that would take advantage of these weaknesses. The second vulnerability was more subtle but potentially more devastating. The enemy had built their network with multiple redundant pathways to ensure reliability. But they'd made all of those pathways dependent on a small number of critical relay nodes. If Maya could simultaneously disrupt those nodes, the entire network would collapse like a house of cards. "Colonel, I'm ready to initiate CEAP," Maya announced. "Once I trigger this, we'll have approximately 18 minutes before their systems Begin adapting and recovering. The team will need to be ready to move immediately. Martinez activated the base's emergency communication system. All stations, this is Phoenix Base. Prepare for immediate close air support mission. Grid reference 41 RQQ1 2345. Priority Alpha extraction. 8 friendly personnel. Maya's finger hovered over the activation key, her heart pounding with the weight of responsibility. 8 lives depended on her getting this exactly right. If her calculations were wrong, if she'd misunderstood some critical element of the enemy's system, the team members would die, and their deaths would be her fault. She thought about Morrison's voice on that first intercepted message, calm and professional even in the face of capture. She thought about the other team members, men she'd never met but who trusted her to bring them home. She thought about her parents and Kevin, and what they'd think if they knew their daughter was about to attempt something that existed at the very edge of what was technically possible. Initiating CEAP in 3.2. Execute. Maya. Press the activation key, and across the mountains of Afghanistan, the enemy's sophisticated electronic warfare network began to die. The effect was immediate and devastating. Maya's screens lit up with status indicators as enemy communication nodes began failing in rapid succession. GPS networks crashed, radio frequencies filled with digital static, and encrypted communication channels dissolved into meaningless noise. In the span of 30 seconds, a communication system that had taken months to build simply ceased to exist. But Maya wasn't celebrating yet. This was the easy part. The real challenge would be maintaining the disruption long enough for SEAL Team 7 to exploit the chaos. Phoenix Base, this is Viper 17, came a voice over the close air support frequency. We have 2 A-10 Thunderbolts inbound to your coordinates, ETA 12 minutes. Copy, Viper 17, Martinez responded. Be advised, friendly personnel are on the ground in an escape and evasion situation. Electronic warfare operations are creating a temporary communications blackout in the target area. Maya monitored the cascade of failures spreading through the enemy network, making real-time adjustments to her attack algorithms to maximize confusion and delay recovery efforts. The enemy was already attempting to switch to backup communication systems, but Maya had anticipated this and crafted her assault to target those systems as well. 7 minutes into the operation, Maya detected the first sign of organized enemy response. Radio traffic on frequencies outside her targeted range indicated that some enemy units were beginning to coordinate manually, using runners and pre-positioned communication equipment that had been kept offline specifically to avoid electronic attack. They're adapting faster than I hoped, Maya reported to Martinez. The team has maybe 10 more minutes before enemy communications start coming back online. Through her headphones, Maya could hear the distant sound of the A-10 aircraft approaching the target area. The distinctive sound of their engines was a welcome reminder that help was on the way. But air support would be useless if they couldn't locate and identify friendly forces in the chaos below. 9 minutes into the operation, Maya's luck changed. Dramatically, her monitoring systems detected a brief burst of encrypted communication on an emergency frequency, a signal so weak and so brief that it would have been invisible under normal circumstances. But with the enemy's jamming capabilities disrupted, even the faintest American military communication signals were getting through. Maya isolated, amplified the signal, her heart racing as she recognized the encryption signature of SEAL Team 7's emergency communication system. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had managed to activate a backup transmitter, and he was sending a message that made Maya's eyes fill with tears of relief and pride. Phoenix Base, this is Mongoose 6. 8 personnel mobile and moving to extraction point Alpha. Electronic attack is working perfectly. Enemy is blind and confused. Viper 17. Be advised we are approximately 400 meters northeast of the compound with the large antenna array. We are moving to open ground for pickup. Do not, repeat, do not engage targets until we are clear." Maya immediately relayed Morrison's message to the incoming aircraft. Viper 17, Phoenix Base. Friendly personnel are 400 meters. Northeast of compound with large antenna array, moving to open ground for extraction. Copy, Phoenix Base. Viper 17 has visual on the compound. We're searching for friendly personnel in the specified area. For the next 4 minutes, Maya maintained her electronic assault while coordinating between the escaping SEAL team and their air support. Morrison continued to provide position updates as his team moved through the mountainous terrain, always staying just ahead of enemy forces that were struggling to coordinate their response without functional communications. At 13 minutes into the operation, Maya heard the words she'd been praying for. Viper 17, we have visual on 8 personnel in the open area northeast of the target compound. They are signaling with IR strobes, beginning close air support for extraction. The sound of the A-10's 30mm cannon echoed across the mountains. As the aircraft began suppressing enemy positions around the extraction site, Maya maintained her electronic attack for 3 more minutes, until Morrison's voice crackled over the radio with the message that made her sink back in her chair with exhaustion and relief. Phoenix Base, this is Mongoose 6. All 8 personnel are aboard extraction aircraft. Repeat, all 8 personnel are safe and en route to base. Mission complete. Maya finally allowed herself to shut down the CEAP system, her hands shaking with the aftereffects of adrenaline and extreme concentration. Around her, the communications bunker erupted in cheers from the other personnel who had been monitoring the operation. Colonel Martinez placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Outstanding work, Chen. You just saved 8 lives." But even as Maya accepted congratulations from her colleagues, her mind was already racing ahead to the larger implications of what they'd discovered. The enemy's sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities hadn't disappeared with this operation. They would rebuild, adapt, and become more dangerous. And somewhere in the American military or intelligence community, there was still a traitor, providing aid and comfort to the enemy. The immediate crisis was over, but Maya Chen's war was just beginning. As the celebration around the communications bunker began to wind down, Maya found herself staring at her screens with growing concern, rather than relief. The electronic warfare attack she'd just executed had been devastatingly effective, but it had also revealed something troubling. The enemy's system had been far more sophisticated than anyone had suspected. "Colonel," Maya called out, her voice cutting through the congratulatory chatter, "I need to show you something." Martinez approached Maya's workstation, noting the serious expression on her face. "What is it, Chen?" "During the CEAP attack, I was monitoring the enemy's response patterns, looking for ways to extend the disruption." Maya pulled up a series of network topology maps that showed the enemy's communication infrastructure before, during, and after the attack. "Look at this recovery pattern." The map showed that while Maya's attack had successfully destroyed the enemy's active communication network, backup systems had begun coming online within minutes of the attack's end. But these weren't simple redundant systems. They were completely different network architectures, suggesting that the enemy had multiple independent communication infrastructures running in parallel. "That's not the work of local insurgents, ma'am," Maya continued. "This level of redundancy and sophistication requires advanced planning, significant resources, and expertise that doesn't exist in this region. Someone with intimate knowledge of American electronic warfare capabilities helped them design a system specifically engineered to survive attacks like the one I just executed." Martinez studied the data, her expression growing increasingly grave. "Are you saying they were prepared for this specific type of attack?" "I'm saying they were prepared for me, Colonel. Or at least for someone with my specific capabilities and training." Maya highlighted sections of the enemy's network architecture that showed clear evidence of American design principles. Look at these routing protocols, these encryption standards, even the physical layout of their communication nodes. It's like looking at a mirror image of our own systems. The implications were staggering. If the enemy had been specifically prepared to counter American electronic warfare capabilities, it meant they had detailed intelligence about not just general military procedures, but about the specific tools and techniques used by specialists. Like Maya, the security breach was even worse than they had initially suspected. Maya's personal communication device buzzed with another message from her brother Kevin. This time, however, the message made her blood run cold. "Hey sis, weird question. But did someone from your work contact me yesterday? Some guy claiming to be conducting a security review called my apartment, asking questions about your background and technical training. I didn't tell him anything, but it seemed sketchy. Should I be worried?" Maya's hands began to shake as she realized the full scope of what they were dealing with. The enemy hadn't just infiltrated American military communications. They were actively investigating the personal lives and backgrounds of key personnel. Kevin's contact meant that someone was specifically targeting her, possibly for recruitment or elimination. "Colonel, we have a major problem," Maya said, showing Martinez the message from her brother. "They're not just targeting military communications. They're going after the families of key personnel." Martinez read the message, her face hardening with anger. "Chun, I want you to contact your brother immediately and tell him to report this. Contact a local FBI. Then I want you to compile everything you've learned about this enemy, network, and prepare a comprehensive briefing. We're taking this to the highest levels of command. Ma'am, with all due respect, we can't trust normal command channels. If they have someone inside our intelligence structure, reporting this through regular channels might just give them advance warning to cover their tracks." Martinez was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the implications of Maya's assessment. As a career military officer, she was trained to work within established command structures and protocols. But as a leader responsible for the safety of her personnel, she also recognized that extraordinary circumstances sometimes required extraordinary measures. "What are you suggesting, Chun?" "I think we need to conduct our own investigation, quietly and carefully, until we can identify who's been feeding intelligence to the enemy. Once we know who the traitor is, we can use that information to feed them false intelligence and turn their own network against them." It was a dangerous proposal that bordered on insubordination, but Maya was convinced it was their only option for stopping the enemy's electronic warfare capabilities and protecting American personnel in the region. Martinez checked her watch. "SEAL Team 7 should be landing at base in approximately 45 minutes. I want you to debrief them personally, and I want to know everything they learned during their captivity about the enemy's capabilities and organization. Then we'll decide our next move." As Maya began preparing for the debrief, her workstation chimed with an alert from her automated monitoring systems. The enemy was already beginning to rebuild their communication network, but they were doing it differently this time, implementing countermeasures designed specifically to prevent another SEAP attack. They were learning from the encounter just as quickly as she was, which meant the next confrontation would be even more dangerous and unpredictable. Maya opened a secure partition on her workstation and began documenting everything she'd learned about the enemy's electronic warfare capabilities. If she was right about the scope of the security breach, this information might be the key to identifying and stopping the traitor who was getting American personnel killed. But she also knew that compiling this information made her a target. If the enemy was sophisticated enough to investigate her family background, they were certainly capable of monitoring her own activities and recognizing the threat she posed to their operations. For the first time since joining the military, Maya Chen felt truly afraid, not for her own safety, but for the safety of everyone she cared about. The war she thought she was fighting had just become deeply personal. The debriefing room at Phoenix Base was designed for sensitive conversations, with sound-dampening materials covering the walls and sophisticated electronic countermeasures to prevent eavesdropping. Maya arrived early, setting up her recording equipment and preparing the questions she developed based on her analysis of the enemy's electronic warfare capabilities. When SEAL Team 7 entered the room, Maya was struck by how normal they looked despite their ordeal. Lieutenant Commander Morrison showed signs of fatigue and stress, but his eyes were alert and focused. The other team members, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, Petty Officer First Class Thompson, and 5 others she'd only known as biometric readings and GPS coordinates, looked like professionals who had experienced something unpleasant, but were already processing it and moving forward. Petty Officer Chen, Morrison said as he took a seat across from her, "I understand we owe you our lives." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Just doing my job, sir. But I need to understand exactly what happened out there, because what I discovered during the rescue operation suggests we're dealing with something much bigger than a simple communications intercept." Over the next 2 hours, the team members described their mission in detail. They had approached the target compound using standard infiltration procedures, maintaining electronic silence and following predetermined routes that should have been completely secure. But as they neared the target, they had encountered resistance that seemed almost supernatural in its precision and coordination. "They knew exactly where we were going to be," Rodriguez explained, his weathered face grin with the memory. "Not just our general approach, but our specific positions, our timing, even our contingency plans. It was like they had a copy of our mission briefing." Thompson nodded in agreement. "The compound we were supposed to hit was empty, sir. Looked like it had been abandoned for days. But there were signs of recent electronic equipment installation. And removal cables, mounting brackets, even some leftover connectors that looked like American military standard." Maya's blood ran cold as she realized what Thompson was describing. "American standard connectors? Can you be more specific?" "And PRC-117 radio connections. Satellite uplink cables compatible with our SYNCAR systems. Even network connectors that looked like they belonged in a talk," Thompson replied, referring to the Tactical Operations Center where Maya worked. Revelation that the enemy had been using American military equipment confirmed Maya's worst suspicions about the scope of the security breach. But Chief Rodriguez's next statement made the situation even more disturbing. "Ma'am, during our captivity, I overheard some conversation between the guards. My Pashto isn't perfect, but they were talking about the American woman who speaks to the machines. They seem to know about you specifically, about your electronic warfare capabilities." Maya felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. The enemy hadn't just been targeting SEAL Team 7, they had been specifically trying to draw her into an electronic warfare confrontation. The entire mission might have been designed as an elaborate trap. "Did they say anything else about American personnel?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yeah," Morrison replied. "They mentioned someone they called the Friend in the Sky Palace. From context, it sounded like they were referring to someone in a senior position, possibly at Pentagon level, who was providing them with intelligence." Maya's mind raced as she processed this information. A senior-level source would have access to mission planning, personnel records, and technical specifications for electronic warfare systems. It would explain how the enemy had developed such sophisticated countermeasures and why they seemed to know so much about American capabilities. But Morrison's next revelation made the situation even more complex and dangerous. "Chun, there's something else. During the interrogation, they showed me photographs." Morrison's voice became tight with controlled anger. "Pictures of American military personnel, including you, at various locations around this base and others. They weren't surveillance photos. They were too high quality, too well composed. Someone with authorized access to classified areas has been systematically documenting our personnel and facilities. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that her personal safety and the safety of everyone on the base had been compromised for possibly months or even years. The enemy wasn't just intercepting communications. They were conducting comprehensive intelligence-gathering operations with inside assistance. Sir, did they indicate what they planned to do with that intelligence? Elimination of key personnel, starting with electronic warfare specialists. Morrison's expression was grim. Chun, they specifically mentioned plans to target you and others with your capabilities. This isn't just about military operations anymore, it's personal. Maya took a deep breath, trying to process the implications of what she'd learned. The enemy had sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities, inside intelligence support at the highest levels, and specific plans to target personnel like herself. But they had also made mistakes during the confrontation, mistakes that might provide opportunities to identify and eliminate their network. Colonel Martinez needs to hear all of this immediately, Maya said. But first, I want to show you something that might help us turn the situation to our advantage. Maya activated her laptop and displayed the network analysis she'd compiled during the rescue operation. While I was disrupting their communications, I was also mapping their entire network infrastructure. I now have a complete picture of their electronic warfare capabilities, including the locations of key nodes, backup systems, and even some of their personnel. She highlighted several locations on a regional map. These are their primary communication sites, and these are the backup facilities they activated after my attack. But more importantly, I've identified the specific vulnerabilities in their system that we can exploit. Maya opened a new file containing intercepts of enemy communications that her systems had recorded during the network mapping process. I've been running linguistic analysis on their communications, and I've identified at least 3 distinct American voices participating in their operations. Not just intelligence sharing, active operational participation. The room fell silent as the implications of Maya's discovery settled over everyone. They weren't just dealing with a security breach or intelligence leak, they were confronting active collaboration between American personnel and enemy forces. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said quietly, "what's our next move?" Maya looked around the room at the 8 men who had trusted their lives to her technical skills and judgment. They had survived an elaborate trap designed specifically to eliminate American electronic warfare capabilities, and now they were looking to her for leadership in confronting a threat that reached into the highest levels of their own command structure. "We're going to do something that's never been attempted before," Maya said, her voice carrying new determination. "We're going to turn their own network against them, identify every American collaborator, and neutralize their electronic warfare capabilities permanently." She opened another file on her laptop, revealing a program interface that looked like something from a science fiction movie. "I've been developing a new type of electronic warfare protocol, something I call adaptive network infiltration. It's designed to not just attack enemy systems, but to actually infiltrate and control them, turning their own capabilities into weapons against them." Morrison studied the interface with professional interest. "How does it work?" "Instead of destroying their network, we're going to become part of it. My software will mimic their communication protocols so perfectly that their own systems will accept us as legitimate users. Once we're inside, we can monitor their communications, feed them false information, and identify every person who's been collaborating with them." It was an audacious plan that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible and legally permissible. But given the scope of the threat they were facing, Maya was convinced it was their only option for protecting American personnel and operations in the region. Thompson leaned forward in his chair. "What do you need from us, ma'am?" "I need you to help me convince Colonel Martinez to authorize an operation that officially doesn't exist. using techniques that haven't been approved by any oversight committee, against targets that include American personnel. Maya's expression was serious, but determined. And I need you to understand that if this goes wrong, we'll all probably end up in military prison. Rodriguez grinned for the first time since entering the room. Ma'am, after what we've been through, military prison sounds like a vacation. The men of SEAL Team 7 had been through hell and back, and they were ready to follow Maya Chen into whatever digital battlefield she thought necessary to protect their fellow service members. But none of them fully understood just how dangerous and complex the enemy they were about to face really was. Maya was about to lead them into a confrontation that would determine not just their own fates, but the future of electronic warfare itself. Colonel Martinez listened to Maya's briefing in complete silence, her expression growing more grave with each revelation. When Maya finished presenting her evidence of high-level collaboration with enemy forces, Martinez was quiet for nearly a minute, staring at the intelligence summaries spread across the conference table. Chen, what you're describing amounts to treason at the highest levels of command, Martinez said finally. If you're wrong about this, you'll destroy the careers of innocent people. If you're right, you're asking me to authorize what essentially amounts to a counterintelligence operation against our own personnel. Maya had spent the past 3 hours preparing for this moment, anticipating every objection and concern that Martinez might raise. Colonel, I understand the gravity of what I'm proposing, but look at the evidence objectively. The enemy's electronic warfare capabilities are too sophisticated to have been developed without extensive inside knowledge. They knew specific details about SEAL Team 7's mission that were only available to senior personnel. And they have current photographs of classified facilities that could only have been taken by someone with authorized access. She activated her laptop and displayed a series of intercepted communications that her systems had recorded during the rescue operation. These voice intercepts include at least 3 distinct American accents participating in enemy tactical coordination. Not just intelligence sharing, but active operational command and control. Martinez studied the spectrograms and linguistic analysis that Maya had prepared. The evidence was compelling, but not conclusive, sophisticated enough to justify suspicion, but not definitive enough to identify specific individuals. Even if I accept your analysis, Chen, what you're proposing is essentially a fishing expedition that could compromise ongoing operations and alert the very people you're trying to identify. Maya had anticipated this objection as well. Ma'am, I'm not proposing a fishing expedition. I'm proposing a targeted infiltration of a known enemy network, using techniques designed specifically to minimize collateral damage and operational compromise. The adaptive network infiltration protocol I've developed will allow us to monitor enemy communications while feeding them false information that actually enhances the security of legitimate operations. She opened another file, revealing technical specifications for the NI system she'd been developing. The beauty of this approach is that we don't have to identify the traitors directly. We just have to control the information they have access to, then monitor how that information is used by enemy forces. The traitors will identify themselves through their actions. Morrison, who had been quietly listening to the discussion, finally spoke up. Colonel, respectfully, after what my team just went through, I think we owe it to ourselves to find out who set us up. If Chen's plan can do that while minimizing risk to other personnel, I think it's worth the attempt. Martinez looked around the room at the faces of people she trusted and respected. Maya Chen was brilliant but relatively inexperienced in the political complexities of military operations. Morrison was a seasoned operator whose judgment she valued highly. The other members of SEAL Team 7 had proven their competence and dedication under the most challenging circumstances. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. But authorizing Maya's proposed operation would require her to take responsibility for actions that pushed far beyond normal protocols and could easily be interpreted as insubordination or worse if they went wrong. "Chen, I need you to understand something," Martinez said finally. "If I authorize this operation and it fails, or if it succeeds but creates political complications at higher levels of command, I won't be able to protect you from the consequences. You could face court-martial, imprisonment, and the end of your military career." Maya met Martinez's gaze directly. "Colonel, 8 good men almost died yesterday because someone with access to classified information betrayed them to the enemy. If we don't stop whoever is responsible, more people are going to die. I can accept the personal risk if it means preventing that." Martinez was silent for another long moment, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Maya's technical skills were exceptional. Her analysis of the enemy's capabilities was thorough and professional, and her proposed solution was creative and potentially effective. But the operation she was proposing existed in a gray area of legality and authorization. That could have serious consequences for everyone involved. "All right, Chen," Martinez said finally. "I'm going to authorize a limited version of your operation. You'll have 72 hours to infiltrate the enemy network and gather actionable intelligence about American collaboration. But I want regular updates every 6 hours. And if I determine that the risks are becoming unacceptable, you'll terminate the operation immediately." Maya felt a surge of relief and excitement. "Understood, ma'am. I'll begin implementation immediately." "One more thing, Chen. I want Morrison and his team to provide security and tactical support for your operation. If the enemy decides to target you directly, you'll need protection." As the meeting broke up and everyone began preparing for the operation, Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had convinced her commanding officer to authorize an unprecedented electronic warfare operation against unknown enemy collaborators. Using techniques that had never been tested in actual combat conditions, the next 72 hours would determine whether Maya Chen was a brilliant innovator who had found a new way to protect American personnel, or a reckless technician whose overconfidence had endangered everyone she was trying to help. But as she began initializing the adaptive network infiltration protocol, Maya allowed herself a moment of fierce satisfaction. For the first time since this crisis began, she was taking the fight directly to the enemy, on terms of her own choosing. The digital battlefield was about to become a very dangerous place for anyone who thought they could betray American service members with impunity. 3 days later, Maya sat in the same communications bunker where the crisis had begun, but everything had changed. Her workstation now displayed real-time intelligence from inside the enemy's communication network, and the picture it revealed was both more disturbing and more hopeful than anyone had expected. The adaptive network infiltration had worked even better than Maya had dared to hope. Her software had successfully integrated itself into the enemy's communication system, appearing to their security protocols as a legitimate network component, while secretly recording every transmission and mapping every connection. In 72 hours, she had gathered enough intelligence to completely understand the enemy's electronic warfare capabilities and identify the American personnel who had been collaborating with them. "Colonel, I need to show you what we've discovered," Maya called out as Martinez entered the bunker for the final briefing. Maya's primary screen displayed a comprehensive network diagram showing the full scope of the enemy's electronic warfare infrastructure. It was even more extensive than they had initially suspected, with communication nodes and relay stations scattered across 3 countries and coordination centers as far away as Pakistan and Iran. The enemy's network includes over 40 communication sites, 12 major coordination centers, and approximately 200 personnel, Maya reported. But more importantly, we've identified the American collaborators. She opened a new file containing voice recordings, communication logs, and photographic evidence gathered during the infiltration operation. 3 American personnel have been actively providing intelligence and operational support to enemy forces. Major James Harrison from intelligence staff at Bagram Air Base, Chief Warrant Officer Patricia Williams from Signals Intelligence at Kandahar, and Colonel David Chun from Logistics Coordination at the Pentagon. Maya paused as she realized the significance of the last name on the list. No relation, ma'am. But Colonel Chun's position at the Pentagon explains how the enemy obtained detailed information about our electronic warfare capabilities and personnel. Martinez studied the evidence that Maya had compiled. The voice recordings clearly showed American personnel providing tactical intelligence to enemy forces. The communication logs documented months of systematic information sharing. The photographic evidence showed American personnel at meetings with known enemy operatives. This is enough to initiate court-martial proceedings against all 3 individuals. Martinez said, "But Chun, what about the enemy's electronic warfare capabilities? Can we neutralize them permanently?" Maya smiled for the first time in days. "Already done, ma'am. While I was gathering intelligence on the collaborators, I was also implementing what I call digital cancer throughout their network. Their communication systems are now completely compromised and under our control. Every message they send, every operation they plan, every piece of intelligence they gather, we see it all in real time." She activated a demonstration on her secondary screen, showing how her software could intercept, modify, and redirect enemy communications without their knowledge. "We can feed them false intelligence, disrupt their operations, or simply monitor their activities indefinitely. Their electronic warfare capability has been effectively neutralized." But Maya's greatest achievement wasn't technical, it was strategic. The intelligence she had gathered during the infiltration operation provided a complete picture of enemy activities throughout the region, enabling American forces to proactively counter terrorist operations and protect personnel before they could be targeted. Over the following weeks, the intelligence Maya had gathered led to 17 successful counter-terrorism operations, the capture of 43 enemy operatives, and the complete disruption of terrorist communication networks. Throughout eastern Afghanistan, the 3 American collaborators were arrested, court-martialed, and sentenced to long prison terms. Maya's innovative electronic warfare techniques were classified at the highest levels, but word of her achievements spread throughout the military intelligence community. She received several commendations and was invited to brief senior Pentagon officials on her methods and discoveries. But the recognition that meant the most to Maya came from an unexpected source. 6 months after the operation, she received a letter from the wife of one of the SEAL Team's 7 members, thanking her for bringing her husband home safely. "Dear Petty Officer Chun," the letter read, "I know that military operations are classified, and I'll probably never understand exactly what you did to help rescue my husband and his teammates. But I wanted you to know that our entire family is grateful for your skill, courage, and dedication. You brought 8 good men home to their families, and we will never forget that." Similar letters arrived from other family members, creating a growing collection of thanks and recognition that Maya treasured more than any official commendation. These people understood something that official reports could never capture: the human cost of the work she did and the lives that depended on her technical skills and judgment. Maya's success also created opportunities for advancement and specialized training. She was selected for the Navy's most advanced electronic warfare program, where she would spend the next 2 years developing new techniques and training other specialists. The adaptive network infiltration protocol she had developed became the foundation for an entirely new approach to electronic warfare, one that emphasized infiltration and control rather than destruction and disruption. But perhaps most importantly, Maya's operation had demonstrated that individual expertise and innovation could make a decisive difference in complex military situations. Her willingness to push beyond established protocols and take personal responsibility for unconventional solutions had not only saved 8 lives but had fundamentally changed how the military approached electronic warfare. A year later, Maya found herself back in San Francisco on leave, working alongside her father in his electronics repair shop, just as she had as a teenager. But now, when she looked at circuit boards and network connections, she saw not just technical challenges, but strategic opportunities. The girl who had once fixed neighborhood gaming consoles had become someone who could reshape digital battlefields and save lives through the innovative application of technology. "You seem different, Mei-Lin," her father said as they worked together on a particularly challenging laptop repair. "More confident, more certain of your purpose." Maya smiled as she carefully soldered a new connection on the motherboard. "I learned something important, Dad. Electronics really are like people. They have their own language and their own ways of telling you what's wrong. But sometimes, you have to be willing to speak their language back to them, to become part of their conversation." Her father nodded thoughtfully. "And what did you tell them?" "That betraying trust has consequences, and that people who protect others deserve to be protected themselves." As Maya prepared to return to her new assignment at the Navy's Electronic Warfare Development Center, she carried with her not just technical knowledge and professional recognition, but a deep understanding of the responsibility that came with her capabilities. She had learned that individual actions could have strategic consequences, that innovative thinking could overcome seemingly impossible challenges, and that the most important battles were often fought not with weapons, but with intelligence, creativity, and unwavering dedication to protecting those who served alongside her. The electronic warfare specialist, who had once been afraid of making mistakes, had become someone who was willing to take calculated risks to achieve objectives that others thought impossible. Maya Chen had found her calling, and in doing so, had helped redefine what it meant to serve in the digital age. 2 years after the Afghanistan operation, Maya stood before a classroom of junior electronic warfare specialists at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. The students, all recently graduated from technical schools and eager to prove themselves, reminded her of herself just a few years earlier, brilliant, dedicated, but lacking the practical experience that transformed theoretical knowledge into operational capability. "Electronic warfare isn't just about technology," she told them, echoing lessons she had learned in communications bunkers half a world away. "It's about understanding human nature, recognizing patterns, and having the courage to act when conventional approaches aren't sufficient." Maya had become the Navy's youngest instructor in advanced electronic warfare, tasked with developing curriculum that would prepare the next generation of specialists for challenges that didn't yet exist. Her courses combined traditional technical training with innovative problem-solving methodologies, psychological warfare principles, and ethical frameworks for dealing with morally ambiguous situations. The students didn't know about Operation Phoenix Recovery, as the Afghanistan mission had been classified. They didn't know that their instructor had single-handedly neutralized a sophisticated enemy electronic warfare network and identified high-level American collaborators. But they could see in her teaching style and practical exercises that she understood electronic warfare not as an abstract technical discipline, but as a critical capability that directly impacted the safety and success of military personnel around the world. "Ma'am," one of the students asked after a particularly challenging simulation exercise, "how do you know when to take risks with experimental techniques versus sticking with proven protocols?" Maya smiled, thinking about a night 2 years ago, when she had convinced her commanding officer to authorize an operation that had never been attempted before. "You have to understand what you're protecting and what you're risking. If sticking with proven protocols means accepting unacceptable casualties or mission failure, then you have an obligation to find better approaches, even if they're untested." She paused, looking around the classroom at young faces that reminded Her of herself, her brother Kevin, and countless other people who had chosen to serve something larger than themselves. But you also have to be prepared to take personal responsibility for the consequences of your decisions. Innovation requires courage, but courage without judgment is just recklessness. After class, Maya walked across the campus to her research laboratory, where she was developing the next generation of electronic warfare capabilities. The lab was equipped with computing resources that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. But Maya's approach to research remained grounded in the practical lessons she had learned during her operational deployments. Her current project involved developing artificial intelligence, algorithms that could automatically detect and counter sophisticated electronic warfare attacks, freeing human operators to focus on strategic decision-making and complex problem-solving. The work was technically challenging and potentially revolutionary, but Maya approached it with the same methodical care and ethical awareness that had guided her work in Afghanistan. The laboratory door opened to admit Captain Sarah Rodriguez, Maya's research partner and the sister of Chief Petty, Officer Rodriguez from SEAL Team 7. Sarah had requested assignment to Maya's research team after learning about her role in her brother's rescue. And the two women had developed both a professional collaboration and a personal friendship based on shared values and complementary skills. Maya, I've got the simulation results from yesterday's testing, Sarah said, settling into a chair beside Maya's workstation. The AI algorithms successfully detected and countered every attack scenario we threw at them, including some that were designed to mimic the Afghanistan network. Maya studied the test results, noting not just the success rates, but the methods the algorithms had used to achieve those results. Technical capability was important, but she was equally concerned with ensuring that automated systems made ethical decisions and maintained human oversight over critical functions. The detection capabilities are impressive, Maya said, but I'm concerned about the counterattack algorithms. Look at Scenario 7. The AI chose to completely destroy the enemy network rather than attempting infiltration and intelligence gathering. Sarah nodded. I noticed that too. The AI is optimizing for immediate tactical success rather than long-term strategic advantage. Exactly. We need to modify the decision-making algorithms to consider intelligence value, collateral damage, and escalation potential, not just mission effectiveness. Maya began sketching modifications to the AI's decision tree on her digital tablet. Electronic warfare isn't just about winning individual engagements, it's about achieving strategic objectives while minimizing harm to innocent people and maintaining options for future operations. The conversation was interrupted by Maya's secure communication device, which chimed with an encrypted message from Colonel Martinez, now serving as a senior advisor at the Pentagon. Maya and Martinez had maintained professional contact since the Afghanistan operation, and Martinez often consulted with Maya on complex electronic warfare challenges facing military units around the world. Chen, I need your assessment of a situation developing in the South China Sea, the message read. Chinese forces are using sophisticated electronic warfare techniques against our naval operations, and initial analysis suggests they may be employing modified versions of techniques similar to those you encountered in Afghanistan. Can you provide consultation on countermeasures? Maya stared at the message for a long moment, realizing that her work in Afghanistan had been just the beginning of a much larger confrontation. The electronic warfare techniques she had developed to counter terrorist networks were now being adapted and deployed by nation-state adversaries with far greater resources and capabilities. Sarah, I think our research timeline just accelerated dramatically, Maya said, showing her partner the message from Martinez. If Chinese forces are using advanced electronic warfare techniques against our naval operations, we need to get these AI countermeasures deployed as quickly as possible. Over the next 72 hours, Maya and Sarah worked around the clock to adapt their research algorithms for naval electronic warfare applications. They consulted with experts at the Naval War College, reviewed classified intelligence reports about Chinese capabilities, and conducted hundreds of simulation tests to ensure their countermeasures would be effective against sophisticated nation-state adversaries. The work was exhausting but exhilarating. Maya found herself drawing on everything she had learned during her operational deployments, her teaching experience, and her research work to develop solutions for challenges that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible. The shy electronics technician who had once fixed broken radios had become someone who was helping to shape the future of military technology and national security. When Maya finally transmitted her recommendations to Colonel Martinez, she felt a familiar mixture of confidence and uncertainty. The countermeasures she had developed were technically sound and had performed well in simulation tests, but electronic warfare in the real world always contained variables that couldn't be fully anticipated or controlled. Martinez's response arrived within hours. "Chun, your countermeasures are being implemented immediately across the Pacific Fleet. Initial results are extremely promising. Thank you for your continued service and innovation." Maya leaned back in her chair, exhausted, but satisfied. The work she had begun in a communications bunker in Afghanistan was now protecting American personnel across the Pacific Ocean. The techniques she had developed to save 8 men from SEAL Team 7 were now safeguarding entire naval task forces from sophisticated electronic attack, but perhaps most importantly, the lessons she had learned about courage, responsibility, and ethical decision-making were now being transmitted to a new generation of electronic warfare specialists who would face challenges she couldn't yet imagine. Maya Chen had found her purpose in the digital battlefield, and in doing so, had helped ensure that others would be prepared to protect and serve in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. 5 years later, Rear Admiral Maya Chen stood on the bridge of the USS Gerald R. Ford as the aircraft carrier steamed through the South China Sea, her weathered hands resting on the tactical display that showed the positions of Chinese naval forces attempting to challenge American freedom of navigation operations. The young electronics technician who had once repaired gaming consoles in her father's shop was now the Navy's youngest flag officer, commanding a carrier strike group in one of the most strategically important regions in the world. The electronic warfare suite aboard the Ford represented the culmination of years of research and development that had begun with Maya's innovative work in Afghanistan. Artificial intelligence algorithms automatically detected and countered electronic attacks, while human operators focused on strategic decision-making and complex problem-solving. The systems were so advanced that they could predict and prevent enemy electronic warfare operations before they were even fully implemented. "Admiral, we're detecting increased electronic surveillance from Chinese positions," reported Commander Lisa Park, the ship's electronic warfare officer and one of Maya's former students from the Naval Postgraduate School. "Their patterns match the profiles you developed for nation-state adversaries." Maya studied the tactical display, recognizing the electronic signatures of sophisticated Chinese electronic warfare systems. The techniques were advanced but predictable, following the same basic principles that had governed electronic warfare for decades. What had changed was the scale and complexity of the operations, as well as the strategic stakes involved. "Implement countermeasures per Protocol 7, Maya ordered. "But I want minimal escalation, just enough to demonstrate our capabilities and discourage further provocation." Within minutes, the Ford's electronic warfare systems had neutralized the Chinese surveillance efforts while simultaneously gathering detailed intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. The operation was conducted with surgical precision, achieving tactical objectives while avoiding the kind of escalation that could lead to broader conflict. Maya's rise through the ranks had been meteoric but well-earned. Her innovations in electronic warfare had revolutionized military communications and saved countless lives in conflicts around the world. Her teaching and research had produced a new generation of specialists who combined technical expertise with ethical judgment and strategic thinking. Her leadership in operational settings had demonstrated that advanced technology, when properly employed, could achieve strategic objectives while minimizing human costs. But success had also brought new responsibilities and challenges. As a flag officer, Maya was no longer just responsible for technical solutions to specific problems. She was responsible for the strategic employment of electronic warfare capabilities in support of broader national security objectives. Decisions she made affected not just individual personnel or units, but entire regions and the global balance of power. 3 months later, Maya stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, wearing her dress uniform and trying not to fidget as the president prepared to award her the Defense Distinguished Service Medal for her contributions to national security. The ceremony was being attended by senior military and civilian officials, including Colonel Martinez, now a brigadier general, and several members of SEAL Team 7, who had specifically requested permission to attend. Rear Admiral Chen's innovative work in electronic warfare has fundamentally changed how our military protects and serves, the president said as he prepared to present the medal. Her courage, creativity, and dedication have saved countless lives and strengthened our national security in ways that will benefit generations of Americans. As the president pinned the medal to Maya's uniform, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a communications bunker in Afghanistan to the bridge of an aircraft carrier, to the Rose Garden of the White House, every step had been driven by a simple commitment to protecting the people who served alongside her, and the values they all defended. After the ceremony, Maya found herself in a quiet corner of the White House with Morrison, now a lieutenant colonel, and several other members of SEAL Team 7. The men looked older and more weathered than they had during their Afghan deployment, but their eyes still held the same steady professionalism that had impressed her during their first meeting. "Admiral, we wanted to thank you again for what you did for us," Morrison said. "Not just in Afghanistan, but for everything you've done since then to make sure other people don't have to go through what we went through." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked at the faces of men who had trusted their lives to her. "Skills and judgment. You don't need to thank me. We were all just doing our jobs." "Maybe," Rodriguez said with a grin, "but some people do their jobs better than others." 1 year later, Vice Admiral Maya Chen sat in her office at the Pentagon, reviewing recommendations for the next generation of electronic warfare research and development. Her current assignment as Director of Electronic Warfare Operations gave her responsibility for coordinating electronic warfare capabilities across all branches of the military, as well as working with civilian agencies and international partners to address emerging threats. The challenges facing military electronic warfare had evolved significantly since her early days as an operator. Nation-state adversaries were developing increasingly sophisticated capabilities, terrorist organizations were gaining access to advanced technology, and the proliferation of commercial electronic systems was creating new vulnerabilities and opportunities. But the fundamental principles that guided Maya's approach remained the same. Understand the human elements behind the technology, recognize patterns that others miss, and have the courage to act when conventional approaches aren't sufficient. Her assistant knocked on the office door. "Admiral, your brother Kevin is here for your lunch appointment." Kevin Chun had graduated from UC Berkeley with a PhD in computer science and had spent the past several years working for a technology company in Silicon Valley. But recent world events had convinced him to follow his sister's example and seek a career in public service. He had just completed his application for a direct commission in the Navy's Cyber Warfare Command. "Maya, I've been thinking about what you told me years ago about electronics having their own language," Kevin said as they walked to lunch. I think I'm finally ready to learn to speak it the way you do." Maya smiled at her younger brother, seeing in him the same combination of technical brilliance and desire to serve that had driven her own career. "It's not an easy language to learn, and the conversations can be pretty intense. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I've had a good teacher," Kevin replied. "Besides, someone needs to carry on the family tradition of talking to machines." As they continued their conversation, Maya reflected on how much had changed since that first crisis in Afghanistan. The scared young electronics technician who had been afraid of making mistakes had become someone who was shaping the future of military technology and national defense. The techniques she had developed to save 8 men had evolved into capabilities that protected millions of people around the world. But perhaps most importantly, the lessons she had learned about courage, responsibility, and ethical decision-making were now being passed on to new generations of warriors who would face challenges she couldn't yet imagine. 10 years after Afghanistan, Admiral Maya Chen stood before the graduating class of the Naval Academy, delivering the commencement address to young officers who would soon be responsible for defending American interests in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. Many of them would serve in electronic warfare specialties, using techniques and technologies that had their origins in a communications bunker in Afghanistan, where a young petty officer had refused to accept that 8 good men were going to die. "Leadership in the digital age requires more than technical expertise," Maya told the graduating midshipmen. "It requires understanding the human cost of the decisions you make, recognizing the patterns that others miss, and having the courage to act when conventional approaches aren't sufficient." She paused, looking out at young faces that reminded her of herself at their age, eager, talented, and ready to serve something larger than themselves. "You will face challenges that don't have clear solutions, situations where the stakes are higher than you're prepared for, and moments when you'll have to choose between personal safety and protecting others. When those moments come, remember that innovation and courage can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles." After the ceremony, Maya walked across the academy grounds to the chapel, where she had agreed to meet with Colonel Morrison, now serving as an instructor at the Army War College. They had maintained their friendship over the years, bonded by shared experiences that had shaped both of their careers. "Maya, I wanted you to know that my son just received his appointment to the Naval Academy," Morrison said as they sat in the quiet chapel. "He wants to be an electronic warfare specialist, inspired by stories about someone who once saved his dad's life." Maya smiled, thinking about the cycles of service and sacrifice that connected generations of military families. "What's his name?" "David. David Morrison. And Maya, he asked me to give you this." Morrison handed her a letter written in the careful handwriting of a teenager trying to make a good impression. Maya opened it and read, "Dear Admiral Chen, my dad told me that you saved his life and the lives of his teammates when I was just 8 years old. I don't remember much about that time, except that my mom was really scared and then really happy when Dad came home. I've decided to follow in your footsteps and become an electronic warfare specialist because I want to protect people the way you protected my family. Thank you for bringing my dad home. Midshipman David Morrison." Maya felt tears in her eyes as she finished reading. The scared 8-year-old who had waited for his father to come home from Afghanistan was now preparing to serve his country, inspired by a story of courage and innovation that had begun in a communications bunker half a world away. "Jake, your son is going to be an outstanding officer," Maya said, carefully folding the letter and placing it in her uniform pocket. "I'd be honored to mentor him when he begins his electronic warfare training." 15 years after Afghanistan, Admiral Maya Chen, now serving as Chief of Naval Operations, sat in her office at the Pentagon reviewing intelligence reports about emerging electronic warfare threats. The world had changed dramatically since her early days as an operator, but the fundamental challenges remained the same: protecting American personnel and interests against adversaries who used increasingly sophisticated technology to achieve their objectives. Her secure phone rang with a call from the National Security Advisor. Admiral Chen, we have a situation developing in the Taiwan Strait. Chinese forces are using advanced electronic warfare techniques to disrupt our communications and surveillance capabilities. The President wants your assessment of our response options. Maya studied the intelligence reports, recognizing electronic signatures and operational patterns that reminded her of challenges she had faced throughout her career. The scale was different, the stakes were higher, and the potential consequences were more serious, but the basic principles of electronic warfare remained constant. I'll have a comprehensive assessment to you within 6 hours, Maya replied. But based on my preliminary review, I believe we have both the capability and the strategic advantage necessary to counter their operations effectively. As she began coordinating with electronic warfare specialists around the world, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this position of responsibility. Every lesson learned, every innovation developed, every relationship built, had contributed to her ability to protect American interests at the highest levels of national security. 20 years after Afghanistan. Admiral Maya Chen stood on the pier at Naval Base San Diego, watching as the USS Maya Chen, the Navy's newest electronic warfare vessel, prepared for its commissioning ceremony. The ship represented the culmination of decades of innovation in electronic warfare technology, incorporating artificial intelligence systems, advanced countermeasures, and command and control capabilities that would have been unimaginable when Maya first began her career. The ceremony was attended by hundreds of naval personnel, including many of Maya's former students and colleagues. Colonel Martinez, now retired but still serving as a defense consultant, stood beside Maya as they watched the ship's crew preparing for the formal commissioning. Maya, I keep thinking about that night in Afghanistan when you convinced me to authorize an operation that had never been attempted before, Martinez said. Did you ever imagine it would lead to this? Maya smiled, thinking about the scared young electronics technician who had once been afraid of making mistakes. I knew that individual actions could have strategic consequences, but I never imagined the consequences would be this significant or this lasting. The ship's commanding officer, Captain Sarah Rodriguez, now the daughter of Maya's former research partner, approached them as the ceremony was about to begin. Admiral, the crew is ready for commissioning. We're honored to serve aboard a vessel that bears your name. As Maya watched the commissioning ceremony, she thought about all the people who had contributed to this moment. SEAL Team 7, whose courage under fire had inspired her to push beyond conventional solutions. Colonel Martinez, who had been willing to take risks to support innovation. Her research partners, students, and colleagues who had helped develop the technologies that now protected military personnel around the world. But most importantly, she thought about her parents, who had taught her to listen to what electronics were trying to tell her, and her brother Kevin, now a Rear Admiral in Pearl, in Farvingwun, the Navy's Cyber Warfare Command, who had followed her example of service and innovation. 20-5 years after Afghanistan, former Admiral Maya Chen sat in her father's electronics repair shop in San Francisco, now expanded into a community center that provided technology education and career counseling for young people interested in science and engineering careers. The walls were decorated with photos from her military career, letters from grateful service members, and awards recognizing her contributions to national defense. But Maya was most proud of the dozens of young people who had trained in the center and gone on to careers in military service, government research, or civilian technology companies. Many of them were inspired by her story, but all of them were motivated by the same desire to serve something larger than themselves. A young woman approached Maya's workstation, where she was repairing a damaged smartphone while explaining circuit analysis to a group of high school students. Ma'am, I'm Jennifer Park, and I just received my appointment to the Naval Academy. I want to specialize in electronic warfare because I read about your work in Afghanistan. Maya looked up at the eager young face, seeing in Jennifer the same combination of technical curiosity and desire to serve that had driven her own career decades earlier. Jennifer, electronic warfare is challenging work that requires both technical expertise and ethical judgment. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Yes, ma'am. I want to protect people the way you protected SEAL Team 7. Maya smiled, thinking about the cycles of inspiration and service that connected generations of Americans who chose to defend their country. Then let me teach you something my father taught me when I was your age. Electronics are like people. They have their own language and their own ways of telling you what's wrong. The key is learning to listen and then having the courage to act on what you hear. As Maya continued working with the young students, she reflected on the path that had brought her from a scared electronics technician to a flag officer to a community educator. Every step had been guided by the same principles. Understand the human elements behind the technology, recognize patterns that others miss, and have the courage to act when conventional approaches aren't sufficient. The techniques she had developed to save 8 men in Afghanistan had evolved into capabilities that protected millions of people around the world. The lessons she had learned about courage, responsibility, and ethical decision-making were now being transmitted to new generations of young people who would face challenges she couldn't yet imagine. But perhaps most importantly, Maya had learned that individual actions, guided by strong principles and supported by trusted colleagues, could indeed change the world in ways that lasted long beyond any single person's career or lifetime. 30 years after Afghanistan DR. Maya Chen, now in her 70s and serving as a senior advisor to the National Security Agency, sat in her home office reviewing the latest developments in electronic warfare technology. Artificial intelligence systems had advanced far beyond what she had once thought possible. Quantum computing was revolutionizing encryption and communication security, and the integration of civilian and military electronic systems had created both unprecedented opportunities and new vulnerabilities. Her secure communication device chimed with a message from Admiral Jennifer Park, now serving as Chief of Naval Operations and widely recognized as Maya's most successful protege. Dr. Chen, we have a complex electronic warfare situation developing in the Arctic. The techniques being used appear to be variations of methods you pioneered decades ago. Could you provide consultation on countermeasures? Maya smiled as she read the message, recognizing the same sense of urgency and responsibility that had once driven her own efforts to protect military personnel in dangerous situations. The young woman who had approached her in the community center decades earlier had become someone who was now shaping the future of national defense. Admiral Park, I'm always available to help protect the people who serve, Maya replied. Let me review the intelligence, and I'll have recommendations to you within 12 hours. As she began analyzing the latest electronic warfare challenges, Maya reflected on the enduring nature of the work she had begun as a young electronics technician. Technology evolved, threats changed, and new generations of specialists took on responsibility for defending their country. But the fundamental principles remained constant. Listen carefully to what the technology is trying to tell you. Recognize patterns that others might miss. Have the courage to act when conventional approaches aren't sufficient. Most importantly, never forget that behind every piece of electronic equipment, every communication signal, and every data stream, there are human beings whose lives and safety depend on the decisions you make. Maya Chen had spent her entire career learning and teaching those lessons. And now, as she prepared to help solve one more complex challenge, she knew that the work would continue long after she was gone, carried on by new generations of dedicated people who understood that service to others was the highest calling anyone could answer. The scared young electronics technician who had once been afraid of making Mistakes had become someone whose innovations and teachings would protect people for generations to come. And in quiet moments like this one, as she prepared to once again use her skills to help keep military personnel safe, Maya allowed herself to feel proud of the legacy she was leaving behind. The digital battlefield would always be a dangerous place, but it would be defended by people who understood not just the technology, but the human values and ethical principles that made that technology worth defending.